What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of I Am Negan, a TWD Universe podcast. My name is Adam Vale. I'm a senior editor over at the Koalition.com. And as usual, I'm joined by editor-in-chief Richard Bailey Jr. What's up, Rich?
What's up, Adam? What's up, listeners and viewers?
And Throwdown's own Carlos Romero.
Yo, what's going on?
What's up, people? This is it. Here we are. This is Fear the Walking Dead, Season 8, Episode 3, Odessa. This is the final season, people. The final few episodes. Isn't it heartbreaking?
This is it. It's almost
No,
over.
it's not heartbreaking because the shit isn't that great. But you know what? You know what, people? This episode is worth talking about. And it's going to be controversial, to quote Richard Bailey Jr., because he had some controversial statements. And I don't know Carlos' stance. And people, we have not discussed this. We've watched the episode. I hope you guys have watched this episode either on AMC Plus or from AMC cable channel, which I'll be airing today as well. So, there's a lot going on. So if you're new to this, we're going to break this down. We're going to do some spoilers. This is not one of those previews that's out there on the UB-tubes. So just be warned. And everybody else returning, guys, you already know how this works, guys and gals. You know what we're all about. So thanks again for all the support on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, everywhere. You know, it's always fun when the numbers are going up for a lot of these episodes. And I guess because people either one are not paying, they just want to come in for the finals and see how it sticks the landing. Sort of like the NBA playoffs as going now, right? It's like they're like, all the numbers are through the roof. Of course, that's usually how it works for all these playoffs because people don't have that time throughout the season to watch all the games. They just want to see the best, right? And then for TV shows, you're hoping that the writers save the best for the last season. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the case for Fear the Walking Dead, at least not so far. But this episode is special, very special. All right, so you guys ready? Are you guys ready?
Let's do this.
All right, I will tell you right now, right off the bat, why I think it's special. It's special because we finally got so many answers for PADRE. Like, instead of dragging things out, which is the norm for almost all these type of shows, Walking Dead proper, also the same with a lot of the storylines. What's happening here? What's going on there? Everybody's got mysteries and this and this and that. But here, this episode, we got the answer to PADRE. Now, I'm just going to jump around because there was a lot going on here. But some of the key takeaways is the biggest one is that we know who PADRE is. We've seen him. It's not Victor Strand. We could clap for that. That was one of our things, right? We weren't sure if they were going to go down that cheap road. And then it's like, oh, well, there is a second in command or someone else who's dealing with it. That's got to be Victor. No, it's not. Thank you. You didn't go down that road. But we also got to hear some stuff about where some of the other cast members are. And that is Daniel. Daniel is back. And it's so funny because they're like, oh. Woo, thank you. Oh man, it's almost a sneeze. That was a sneeze.
This episode's been that crazy, huh?
That crazy. I'm sorry. There's so much to unpack. But let's just start right from the beginning of how this starts off with this episode. And we have Madison. She's strapped down. It looks like they're about to do some more experiments on her, taking more blood. But then we had Shrek, not Shriek. We have Shriek. That's a bird's name. And we found out, that's one of the other answers with all these weird names that were given that we refuse to call them by. And it's because PADRE, who is a military captain or whatever that was in charge, gave this whole analogy of people and birds and flocks and how they stick together and family. So he was naming everybody birds. He named his kids birds and blah, blah, blah. Who cares?
Crane.
But yeah, that was Crane. I think that was a brother's name.
Yeah,
no, it was
the brother. Yeah.
Brother's name. June. June is Blue Jay. That was his episode of the name of the last episode. So they're talking about, oh, we're gonna make her suffer, and now Madison is excited to see June. They haven't seen each other since the baseball field a few seasons back, where they thought at least June thought she was dead. And actually, it's like, oh, well, she's sort of still going to die, says Shriek, because she's going to do the same thing that she did with the other kid and let this head take a chomp out of her. But this all right. So just to clarify one, I was like, there's a lot of answers. It doesn't mean it's a great episode, but we did a lot of answers, and some things didn't make sense. And this part here didn't make much sense only because, and this is only because we see Mo and Dove show up, and Dove is Mo's friend, the tall girl that's been showing her the ropes and all this stuff. But now they're back on shore, and Mo is playing investigator. She's like, we're going to find out what's going on. I want to see what's happening. And this breaks the story. Everything just like twigs are snapping off. Because on one hand, we'll find out later that Daniel tells Madison when they meet up and starts talking about all the stuff going on, that they've been looking for Padre's Island for years and couldn't find it. But yet here it is, Mo and Dove are just going back and forth, and it's still it's like no biggie. Clearly there's no supervision on this island, but the fact that they are so close, then Daniel and your friends, you haven't been looking that hard. You have not been looking that hard, because clearly it's not that far away. It's not that far. So before I go any further, just seeing Mo, seeing Dove, seeing that this is their goal, and then that Madison now with the Chomp and June, and that just this section here, did this make sense story-wise? Were you guys excited when you saw how this whole thing was panning out with the connections?
I'll let Rich go first.
I was not excited for that, and I also was not excited for this episode. I will say that, it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, we knew that Mo was going to be suspicious anyway because of the season premiere and how she kept hearing back and forth Padre is not being honest in what is happening. So I figured that she would investigate further to see what exactly was right and what was wrong. So that made sense to me. But the way that things have gone so far this season, I think it's pretty obvious that it's going to be all of the people that we know, the characters that we know, teaming up to take out Padre. I mean, I think that's the whole point of the season, because Padre is supposedly the villain, right? That's the big bad.
I would have thought that too. That's what we were all thinking, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, okay.
But no. Keep going.
Oh no. So when I saw this, I didn't really. I mean, I figured that, things have to come together for them to get to this point where they fight against Padre. So it made sense in that regards, but a lot of other stuff doesn't make sense. So, but I just said, well, they're just trying to get from point A to point B. So it is what it is. I will play along for the time being.
What about you, Carlos?
It's difficult for me because there's just so many jumps, so many leaps of faith between characters, where we're going from Mo being like, yo, I want to go back to Padre, to like, I'm about to throw everything off just to get to the cut to the chase of this. And it's like, we've only seen this character twice, and we're already going through that leap where we're supposed to understand why the character is motivated to do what she's doing, but we really don't. They just do a jump cut from one episode to the other, and we're like, oh, I apparently she's one of the crew now, one of the main protagonists. And the whole thing with
which one, with Mo or Dove?
With Mo.
Okay.
And Dove is pretty much the same. I mean, the Dove stuff angered me even more, because Dove was like, oh, you guys been lying to me. Oh, but so I realized that you guys have been lying to me, but I'm gonna go with you guys because I'm pissed at this chick for killing my mom.
Well, she wanted to, and that's the thing. It's a lot. There was a lot to unpack from different areas, because I'm trying to figure it out too. Because there was jumps and cuts, and yes, we finally got to see Padre. It was the captain's dad. You see that segment where he's talking with his two kids, the son and daughter. We clearly see that the daughter is the Shriek. And so we're like, okay, now we're getting that much. And then they would cut back to the rest of the group. It's like, all right, there you go. Now you get a little backstory of that, and then we get to see what's going on here.
We're just jumping all over the place. Where we're jumping to a flashback, we're jumping to the train station, we're jumping into the river where they're about to, where they're talking, negotiating, all that stuff, and then they're jumping to the island where Padre is located, and they're jumping back into another flashback, into another. It's just too much, and there's different flashbacks. There's a Padre flashback, and then there's the crew flashback with Morgan and stuff when they're going over all that. So it's just too much, man. I feel like it's not too. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
Oh no, continue. Then I will say something after you.
I just feel like it's not too cohesive the way the story is being told. I do like that they clarified the Padre stuff already, so we can better I guess we'll see what the villain is at the end if it's still the siblings, but just as the way this episode was constructed, I felt like it was too herky-jerky and all over the place.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you say, Carlos. And I also personally think that, in my opinion, they could have had one episode with the flashback like we've had on the regular Walking Dead show, where they had a whole episode about Negan's backstory. I think that would have been better, because there's too much to expect the audience to keep up with everything that happened in the past and what's happening in the present. It's a lot back and forth. So I think they should have took that approach with this episode and made it a flashback the entire episode. But I guess it is what it is, because they had to connect what was happening in the present with what happened in the past.
And every episode is kind of the same in a way. It's like, okay, which character from this franchise in the past are we gonna bring back?
Mm-hmm.
How are they gonna be related to the whole Padre stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And which two characters are gonna be reunited and be like, oh, we're besties?
Well, that's been the trope for this entire season. Not even season, I should say the series, because we've seen that in multiple ones. We saw that with the nuke one. We've seen that with the flood season. We've seen it with with Jane? Remember when Jane grabbed them and started splitting them and putting them in different camps, and then we would see what's up with those groups and how they're handling things. So this is just more of that, because once Mo gets in there and she's just like, oh, what's going on? And they break down and they go through the whole thing about who's good, who's bad. The big part. And all this already, I was like, sort of like, I was about to text back to Rich. I'm like, you're right. This is, hot garbage. This is pointless. Now they're all confused. Now they confuse Mo. Now they're confusing Dove. And it's like, oh, parents, we know your parents. Because Madison was like, I remember you. How do you remember? I took you away from your parents. You know what I mean? I was like, well, oh boy, they shoot her first then. It's like, but it's not the way they leave. And then surprise, there's an ambush and there's a bunch of angry parents, they're like, we got you. And then there are, go ahead.
Not only that, the whole mob of angry parents that a lot of them have been waiting over 7 years, plus for their kids, and they're being led. It just so happens that they're being led. Their commander is Daniel from season X.
Well, he was from last season. He was still around. He was there from last season.
He's been around the whole time. The last time I remember him, and I remember him because he was the one that was in the garage by himself.
He was a barber in the first season. I mean, he's been there, and then they killed him off, and then he came back like Madison from the dead. Like, I'm back.
I just want to say, Daniel looks pretty good for somebody
7 years.
Who's been around for 7 years. I mean,
who was dealing with, was it Alzheimer's or something? Remember they were giving they said it was like PTSD or whatever. He was blanking out, and they had him drinking mata or whatever hell he was drinking in this episode with a straw and stuff. I'm like, oh wow, you got those type of things. You were able to find some straws, But I get what you're saying, and then that was also upsetting. But that little conversation, 5-minute conversation he had with Madison, there was a lot to unpack, because he fills in a lot. He's like, boom, what happened? Well, we know Morgan from what we saw of the season, episode 1 of the season, when he's talking to Padre, saying, did you find everybody on the rafts? When they did that flashback. Yeah, we found some, but not everybody. Well, we know that they did find Daniel and a bunch, and they grabbed them, and then they evaluated, see who they can use and who's willing to play ball with their program and who's not. And for some reason, they found him unuseful because he's old. That's wrong. The man's a barber. So even if you don't want him for the military aspect, the man knows how to cut hair, and you're always going to need a barber. But whatever.
Well, not him.
Not him, right? There you go. So, and he had the military training and all this stuff. I found that bizarre that they would just cast him out the way he did. But then he said he found other groups and stuff, and it was other camps and parents, and they had talked about how their kids had been taken and this whole thing. It's like, yeah, I think I did some of that, blah blah blah. But the other part is we find out sort of what happened to Charlie, because we assume that she died because of the radiation and all that stuff, right? And he sort of hints that she did die because he's like, well, I wasn't there when she needed me. What does that mean? Is she dead somewhere, or is she still sick? Yeah, that really open-ended, so I wouldn't be surprised if she's actually still alive for some reason, because this is like a novella. People come, they die, and they come back, and they forget their memory, get the hit on a rock or whatever. And then the other part is Lucy, because we assumed Lucia, right, was going to be part of this, and then she was on there. And no, I guess he said the same thing. He wasn't there for her either. So is she dead? Is that his way of saying that she has died? So those are two cast members that we should not expect to see in this one. No talk of Victor Strand in this. There was no talk of that, which is very surprising, which means he is going to play a big part. Because it's more of that like, out of sight, out of mind, and then once he comes back, dun dun dun, look who it is.
Well, I mean, they've been doing a huge effort in this season to humanize the whole Padre squad, especially the siblings. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, because that's what I mentioned earlier. I don't think they're going to be the main bads of this series. Yeah, they've been humanizing them way too much. Yeah. We saw the ending of the episode, obviously, with the whole, the dead portion where they're all just the crates. But we'll see. I have a feeling like.
That's the questions. There's some questions that they didn't answer, but a lot of them they did, and we'll just run through it right now. Besides that part, we find out, as we brought up at the beginning, is that Shriek is the daughter of Padre. Padre's a real guy. He had plans that with this island, and he was like, oh yeah, we're going to take some people, we're going to bring them here, we're going to grow, and the kids were like, why can't we just stay here alone? It's like, well, we need to trade and all this stuff. Well, right now it doesn't look like they were trading, they're just taking kids. So that was kind of weird that was his plan, but that doesn't seem like that's the plan that the kids doing, follow up with. So then we see another flashback, and it's with Shriek with her brother, and they're in a boathouse, right? It looked like it was a boathouse, and the sister realizes, oh, the binoculars are here, and the dad had talked about how when he was giving that whole analogy about birds and people and groups and family, he was using the binoculars, and he had to go back to the mainland. So the son starts freaking out. Oh, he needs a binoculars, and he's like, no, he's fine. He don't need. Yeah, he does. He grabs him and goes running out, and he locks the door and barricades it so she can't go after him. Very silly. Don't understand that, but that just told me something bad was going to happen to him. And then this is the thing I don't understand. When they were running around and all the containers, because he had told the kids, oh, you see the containers of good supplies, this is for us to keep us going, and then also for trade with groups. But then we find out that they're really full of walkers that they called some other name. I forgot what they called them, but they're walkers. And I guess some of them seeped out. So when the sister breaks out, she was running after him to try to catch him. He's now all of a sudden like surrounded by them and freaking out, and looks like he's about to die. So before I go any further, did I miss something? Did he mention that they were, those canisters were full of walkers?
Well, the crates. You're talking about the crates.
The shipping crates, the shipping containers. Yeah, all those. Remember, because that's what it looked like. He was running through a shipping, a whole bunch of them. It was like a maze.
I didn't catch originally from the flashback what the importance was. They just made it seem afterwards. They made it obvious that there's something valuable hidden in those crates. But apparently that it's been, surrounded by a bunch of walkers.
So the way he made it seem, that I gathered from this, and people, if you're listening and watching this, leave your comments over on YouTube if you also picked up on this. In that really brief description and an intro that we saw Padre talking to his kids, he said that the island had all these crate stuff, and this is for all the supplies. So I was thinking that maybe this island was where ships would come and then drop off these containers, and then they would do the offloading, like a shipping yard, offloading of goods, and then they would get distributed out to other areas. That's what I was thinking, and that he felt that since they controlled the island, that now that was a great place to just bunker down. And so he was going out to the mainland to find groups and stuff. So to answer your question, I thought that's what it was. It was just, this is where all these crates that were brought into this community were stored on this island, and now he was in control of it. So there's a good chance that they have plenty of supplies for themselves and others to trade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Carlos said he'll be right back.
Oh,
I just want to make a comment. Yeah, I just want to make a comment and say, my perspective on this, I understand the motivation that Shriek has, because obviously they witnessed their father getting killed. All right, so their whole thing about separating the parents from the kids, because they don't want the kids to know the truth about what happened to their parents if they did get killed. So I kind of understand that motivation, but I personally don't buy Shriek or her brother as any real threats that are going to take a long time to deal with. I feel like if Morgan and the others band together, they can easily take these characters out. That's why I want to see exactly what the long-term plan is for this entire thing with these two characters, now that they have revealed themselves to be behind PADRE. Because to me, they're not really intimidating. I know they had stuff to make you think they are intimidating when you see them with the other soldiers and stuff, but I don't buy that personally based on what I've seen so far. No. So I would like to see how they're going to get to this resolution and having to deal with the both of them.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I mean, I said right off the bat, once we saw that this was the story that they were going with for this season, it fell apart for me. I still don't like this story. This whole thing of like, oh, we hired everybody to just go kidnap kids and they're just going to accept it. And that's the way it works. And it's still, even this didn't make much sense. But I did like the fact that they didn't linger all this until the final episode, so that way we could say, wow, this was garbage. Why did you do that? I like the fact that they just spewed it all now. So we already, it's the curtain's already been pulled. It's like, here it is, ta-da, it's the two kids. So I guess no one sees the brother. They haven't seen the dad in years, the adults that are there. Because even June had brought it up. It's like, man, how did you convince these adults to follow some kids? Oh, well, they think he's still alive. What? And they don't see him? This doesn't make any sense. Like, for years. How does this work? And so your brother just gives these commands over the walkie-talkie, and that people just blindly follow. And it's up to the sister to enforce it. So you would think there would be more tiers, like second in commands and stuff like that. Like if that was the thing with Negan. When he had his group, he had, Trevor from Grand Theft Auto and a few other, I'm blanking on the actor's name, but he had a crew, and we would see them sit around like their round table. And so those are the ones that we knew that were going back and forth, that were communicating with other groups, trade groups, remember? And they were the ones that were reporting to him, say, hey, there's these people that are causing problems on the road. Well, it looks like these siblings don't have that. We don't see that. And that's the upsetting part. I like that we got these answers. I liked also when there was that one that the mother was calling on the walkie-talkie, telling Daniel, was like, yeah, I think I'm that girl's mother. And then go back and forth. It's like, yeah, I can recognize this and this and that. And she's like, well, is that my mom? And then, she was like, no, that's definitely not your mom. That's definitely. And then we do see soldiers show up. But then again, those soldiers are not soldiers. Those are kids. So did June already cut off all the adults' fingers, trigger fingers, that now the kids have to go out and do all the hard work? Is that what's that they didn't explain? Because we understand that they were training them, but it looks like who's dispatching to go and do these things? Is it the brother? Because clearly it wasn't the sister, because she was already out there when this happened. So that didn't make much sense. But that whole back and forth that Dove had with the soldier kid, and it's like, no, they're fooling. They're like, oh, they're brainwashing you. He's like, you don't know that. It's like, I have a feeling. And it was all about finding the files. We want to see files, because apparently people at PADRE are really good at documenting all of this. Who's doing that in the filing room? I don't know. But someone is writing this stuff up and keeping track of all the kids that they take. And it's going to have all the proof they need. But then it turns out The sad truth is that's where we get this episode named after her. That is Dove's real name, and it's linked to the woman that we saw in last season with Madison and with Morgan and the whole thing, and that her kid was taken, and she wanted to get back to Padre and do all that stuff. So she died, and it's all right. And I liked, and I brought it up before we started filming, just the fact that they threw in a flashback of that, because that's something that this show is infamous for not doing. They just tell you a lot of backstory or off-camera stuff, and you just have to use your imagination, close your eyes, like, oh yeah, okay, I can envision this happening and seeing this. This was very important, but then again, it was important and just mindless, because like, oh, but she wasn't that big of a deal. It would have been great if it was really connected to another cast member that we were familiar with, that we had seen for a while, and then all of a sudden like, oh wow, look at that. Now I get it. But then that doesn't really add up with the age, because I don't think she mentioned how old her kid was, and clearly Dove is older than 7 or 8 years old. I don't want to hear it, right? She's definitely in her teens. So that was a little bit out there, but that ending, that ending of just, all right, let me just show you everything. This is what's going on, and the brother and all that stuff. When Shriek gets back to the island and says, oh, well, we have a plan now. And the brother's like, what's the plan? Well, we've been training these kids to fight, and we know that those people, they said they weren't going to come back, but they will. They're going to come back. So this is it. This is our time. So if this is the end game for the series, is to have these kids fight the parents, and some could be their parents made, some may not, but there are other parents that have lost kids that were taken. That doesn't bode well with me for a series finale. That's not the climax I want. There's nothing, and that's why I feel like there has to be something more. It can't be these two.
Oh.
It can't be. This can't be the story.
Well, no, because you saw at the end of the episode, there's a whole bunch of walkers that it looks to me like they're going to unleash those walkers, and now the kids and the parents will have to fight together to get rid of the walkers. That's probably what's going to happen.
Well, that's it. Also in the crates, and that's what I don't understand either. Why was the dad hoarding them all? He just said that they were full of goods for sharing and stuff, for supplies and blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. But clearly there was a bunch of walkers in them, because as we all know, that was during that same scene when they did the flashback of the son running, getting swarmed. Dad comes to save the day, starts shooting them. Then he figures, hey, I'm going to lift you guys up on top of the crates to get away from them, but he couldn't save himself, and then he dies. So that's how he dies. But then there was tons of them. How? Where did they come from? This is the island, and yes, we've seen in other seasons where walkers show up on the island, but not to this extent. There was like 30, 40 of them. Like they were already there walking around, which made no sense, because when we see them at the beginning, it's as if this is a safe haven, right? This island is safe. He's walking down the pier to the boat. Everything is great. Look what we have here. This is great. Even the kids are like, why should we engage with the outside world? We have everything we need. He's like, well, eventually we'll run out, and there's other things that we need, and we have to trade. What were you going to trade? Walkers? You were going to give them a bunch of, hey, surprise, open up. Huh? You got Fruity Pebbles. Wrong. You got a bunch of walkers in this crate. Gotcha. That part didn't make any sense. And if this is what they plan on doing, just unleashing all these walkers, but it sounded more like the kids, because she said to the brother, man, what have we been training these kids to do? It's time to really put that out there now.
They're gonna. Well, what they're doing is they're gonna try to clear it out and get whatever's hidden inside, whatever's they're protect or they want to get. So that I think that's
that.
So you think the stuff is hidden? Because if that's the case, they've done this story before. Because remember, there was that, remember there was that season where it was, I think it was June. Yeah, was it June? No, Jan. It was Jan. Remember when she had her groups, and there was this military like silo area, whatever, that was infested, and they needed to get stuff in there, but there were so many. So then they would send the people that they just captured to go in there and try to retrieve the stuff. Remember, Charlie was there, and a few other, Alicia and stuff. And eventually they were able to clear the area out so that way they can get the supplies that were in there. And if that's what they're doing, it's been done already. But then again, that doesn't make sense because that was not cleared up at the beginning of this episode. Because Dad made it seem like those crates in the background were full of goodies. Didn't say anything about walker problems and needing help to clear them. And the kids made it seem like that was safe haven. Why? The island itself. But with the kids coming up with their idea, we don't know. Maybe they'll throw in some more flashbacks that Dad had discussed that this was the plan to take people's kids and do all that stuff. That story doesn't make sense to me. That overarching story that they went with the Padre and the kids and all, it made no sense. But he did mention the governor and the bunker. So there was some truth to that when there was communications. Because remember last season when Alicia found the bunker, found out someone that was like, oh, that guy that died down. He's like, oh, we were communicating with a group called Padre. And they said they have everything and that we just have to get to them. And that was Felicia's whole goal after that was to get to Padre, find them. Remember, she even put a leash on a walker that she thought knew. And it's like, oh, they always go back to where they know where home is, whatever. And it was just going in circles. That was dumb. But she did it anyway. Oh, man. But so they were throwing callbacks, having things connect with last season and then even prior seasons. So it's like, okay, that's great and all, but man, this overarching story of the kids and stealing other people's kids and kidnapping and then killing parents, and it made no sense. And like you said, Carlos, they had talked about how far out was it, Louisiana or whatever, that they were venturing out.
Baton Rouge.
I was like, so you must have like a super network of collectors out there. Mm-hmm. Going out, finding kids, and bringing, and not one parent decided, let's find these people, let's tail them, let's track them down. Because 7 years wandering around that they said they've been looking for this island. Meanwhile, we got Mo and Dove making a quick trip to the mainland, and it just makes no sense. It makes no sense because clearly because remember, and Daniel was like, oh, well, I've been living in the swamp and putting together an army of people of angry parents, and I'm trying to help them put together their families. I'm like, well, you're doing a bad job because clearly you should go to the waterfront because you would see the boats, right? You would think there'd be a network of boats going back and forth with kidnapped kids, back and forth. There you go. Follow the boat.
I agree. But since you were talking about some stuff that doesn't make sense, now I have a question for the both of you as well as the listeners and those that decide to comment on this video. What the hell are they doing with, Dwight, his son, Dwight and Sherry's son? Because in this episode, you saw he was once again when they had him in the I believe it was in the operating room. It looked like he was totally fine, but yet in the previous episode, you saw him get bit.
Yeah.
So that's why I was very confused about that because I thought he was. Go ahead.
Yeah, they glossed over it, but when June was arguing with Mo and all of them when they were talking about doing the surgery, she's like, "Oh, it's pointless and this isn't helping." She's like, "It's not. It works. It works." She kept saying, no one knows it works. And I think that was it. That's it. It does something. And whatever it was that they're working on does work because as she finished, like you said, he seems okay.
Yeah.
But then again, everybody responds differently depending on where they got bit. We've seen that without almost in every Walking Dead spinoff, and whether it's an arm or a hand and you can cut it off and you're okay, a leg or whatever. It's certain things, certain parts of the body. But she said it briefly, and I think everybody just like ignored it. When she said, no, it works. No, it works. Well, how do you know? No one's asked it. No one said, hey, how do you know it works? I thought it was Madison. That Madison was the reason that her blood, like maybe she was bit and they noticed, and that's why they kept draining her blood every week. Because remember, they said they're taking the blood every week. And then that blood was getting sent, I guess, over to June. And then June was doing radiation and other things with the blood and then testing on different people. And that's what it's funny when she did bump in with that angry mob of families, and like, oh, you did this whole thing. Like, well, I didn't want to do it, but she made me do it. I was like, really, that's what you're gonna do? The evil doctor, come on now. I mean, we can look at real world history back with the Nazis to see how far that argument goes. It's like, well, he made me do it. You had a choice. You still had a choice. It may have been a horrible choice. You could have offed yourself like, I'm not doing this, but you still had a choice, and you were doing what you were doing. So whatever. But that's what I'm thinking with the Finch thing, is that they're going to have some. But Robert Kirkman, and he's not involved in this. And for those of you should know, he's the creator of Walking Dead and all. From my understanding, he still has no involvement with Fear the Walking Dead. As you know, this is not linked to a comic. This is TV land written, So, but he never had anything written about a cure, and then just ta-da, this is it, and we're all good now. That's why Walking Dead proper, when it ended, did not have that happy ending. There was still no cure. Just a bunch of people surviving. So I think it'd be kind of funny if this is where they're going with this, and this is how Fear the Walking Dead ends. It's like, we got the cure, so now what do? We're gonna spread it to the world, and then the credits roll. Is that what you think is gonna happen, Rich? Do you see that happening?
No, but what I do see happening is a horrible ending to the show. But let's see what happens. I would like to be proven wrong.
Same here. It's just trying to see where they're going to go now. It would have been cool if Padre was actually Padre, but the whole thing with the siblings, and that's the only part that made sense for me. Hopefully, I have a strong feeling that they're going to end up being good guys. Also, there's going to be, how many episodes are left in this season/series?
I think it's 12 episodes in the
12 altogether.
season.
Yeah, 6. Yeah. There's 6 in one batch, and then they're going to take a break, and then
they're going to have 6 more.
Yeah, 6 more.
Yeah. So I have a feeling that they're not going to be the main bad guys.
They can't be. They can't be.
One other thing I do want to mention too, to go back to what was said earlier about when Daniel gave the explanation as to what happened to the others, Charlie, so on and so forth. I would have liked to have seen an episode, the way they split this show up. Have an episode and shows what happened to one group. Have another episode and shows what happened to the other group. I think that would have been better, as opposed to them just randomly showing up. And yes, they have a reunion, as Carlos said, every week on this show. I think that would have been better to give you context as to what happened to each character after the events of last season.
I gotta see. I should have. Now think about it. I should have watched that last episode back, because when everybody went on the raft from last season, was Lucia with Charlie? Was she helping Charlie on the raft, taking care of her?
I don't remember what happened.
Yeah, I don't remember. But I thought I could have swore Daniel was there, but then Daniel said he wasn't there for her. He promised that he'd be there for her, and he wasn't. But he didn't say she died. And the same thing with Lucia. He didn't say he saw her die. I think, what if we do get, like what you're saying, what if one of these episodes we're following that group on a raft somewhere else? And who knows, maybe Strand is on that raft with them.
Well, you know what? I have no faith they're going to do that now, because we saw Daniel in this episode, right? It's like they've jumped ahead in time to what's happening in the present. And the thing is that as a viewer, when you saw all of these characters going their separate way at the end of the season, it would have made more sense to, if you're going to start this season off, let's show what happened to this group after that moment. Then you take another episode, you show what happened to another group. Then you could have had an episode when the two characters or the group of characters reunite. That would have made more sense. But instead, they decided, no, we don't really have a good idea of how we want to do this season. So we're just going to throw a whole bunch of stuff together and see what works. And people will be confused, but they're going to watch because it's the final season, right? So that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to approach this situation.
Yeah, and especially with the whole thing with Charlie, and it's funny when Madison was like, when she was like, how do my kids, when she was talking to June about it. It's like, how did my kids handle everything? Oh, you wouldn't have recognized them. Like, yeah, why don't you say everything that happened? It's like,
Yeah.
and say what Charlie did. Oh, Charlie killed your son. No, that's a whole other story. But what? I was like, oh man, there was so much. It's one of those shows because it has such a range of cast members, and some have come and gone, and they move them around, and it really is a lot to follow. And this is the problem with shows in general that go this long, 8, 9, 10, 11 seasons, and have double-digit seasons. Nowadays, we don't really see that. Now it's like 8, maybe 10 episodes a season. They were still doing long in the tooth, 24 episodes, 16 episodes. It's still a lot. It's a lot of TV. So there's a lot to catch. And of course, there's a lot of filler in all of those. So to try to cram and to make sense, I get it. It's tricky. But to introduce this type of story, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, no, I agree. It is a lot to consider, but I will say in the past seasons, they have had single episodes dedicated to a group of characters.
Oh, yeah,
They are definitely capable of doing that, but they have decided because of how they started this season, it pretty much was like a reboot of this is what's happening with the characters now. Let's never mind telling you what happened in the last couple of years. This is what's happening now. But we'll throw in some references as to what happened in the past. But yeah, they definitely could have done a better job with that. But again, they also want some mystery about it. So this is why they took this approach to have people just randomly show up, and now you see them reuniting and stuff like that.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't handled like the way Walking Dead proper was handled, because it did all that. Walking Dead proper, they did the flashbacks, they did the narration talking about the past, this and that, just to get everybody up to speed. And I think also, remember, we weren't sure if this was going to be the final season. It wasn't officially confirmed until long after that season had ended. And it's like, and which tells me they were probably still on the fence. Like, what do we do? Can we keep going with this? Ratings haven't been great. They're not horrible. I mean, for what the cast is worth and financials and all that stuff, it doesn't. Remember, they don't really have these elaborate sets. They don't have these big stars on here. They can do the balancing act, and this is why it's been going so long. But we weren't sure. And then when they officially said, all right, this is what we're getting, and now we're getting a shorter season, I'm sure there was a lot of rewriting of ideas of like how they wanted things to go toward the ending. And I was like, all right, well, we got to skim this, skim that, skim this. So yeah, it would make sense if we had a full season and then they could fill in an episode dedicated to like how these people are surviving. How did this happen? Here's and we might get that. But not out in every episode. Maybe it might be one episode that just does a lot of jumps, back and forth, and then we just try to link things up together in a nice package. But either way, it's very tough to stick the landing on any long in a tooth show, especially something like this. I mean, tonight I'm sure a lot of people listening, maybe there was some crossover, and at least we are with us. Succession is ending. Are they going to stick the landing? It's a little longer than a typical episode. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it's always a tricky part. But it's the buildup, because then you can see where it's going. And the buildup right now, I don't like where it's going. This story doesn't work for me as a whole. I really don't think that these two kids, if this is the thing and they plan on sending the mob of other kids out to get their parents along with walkers, that doesn't really make much sense to me. For what? Because it doesn't, none of it makes sense. What are you doing? You're going to do all this and then what? You just killed the communities around your area, so now you can't find any more kids. It doesn't add up. And I want to see these collectors. I want to see all the collectors, because if you have all these groups, like Daniel said, that he was encountering, all these groups from all over multiple states and stuff nearby that were reporting missing kids, then there should be an army of collectors out there. And it shouldn't just be reliant on the kids and walkers. And you got unless Madison and Grace, or at least because Madison was in jail, but Grace and Morgan, man, they've been busy. They've been busy gathering up all these kids. But Morgan still trying to shave face, because that's the other thing. We're supposed to think that he's going to help them, because that's what Madison told Mo. It's like, oh, well, we need a new lead. We need somebody that can help us. Oh, I know. Your father's going to help. Your father. Where did he go? We don't know where he went. Maybe he does know another group, and maybe we will see Victor and they're part of another group. Again, retold story, because we've seen that before, where he went to find Victor. Remember, Victor had a whole other group with a wall, and he was the Rangers and all this. Oh, whatever, man. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. So honestly, I don't know if it's going to stick the landing. If there even is a landing to stick, what would be a good outcome? You know what? That's the question. Carlos, what would be a good finale for this series? What is it? What do you think would be satisfying?
That's a really good question. I don't know. You know, there has to be some action. You know, I would like some action going around, hopefully. It just has to, you know, everything has to be wrapped up. All the storylines have to be wrapped up. You have so many cast of characters that it's difficult sometimes to see, like, oh, you know, where did one leave off? Where was the other one? You know, where's one part of the characters? Like we felt it in this episode. It's like we're talking about, oh, you know, we're gonna make June. We're gonna make Madison the leader, but now she's flawed because she was a collector. All right, we're gonna make now Morgan the leader. No one's met Morgan other than the main cast characters, but the parents.
And Daniel doesn't seem to be upset that people just saying, well, we're demoting you instantly right now. We're not even considering you, even though we called you the commander earlier in this episode. You are nobody, sir.
Daniel's gonna get demoted for Morgan, who most of the crew hasn't even met before. And when they hear his story, where it's like, oh, it's a bunch of, you know, all these parents are getting revenge because they had their kids taken from them. Morgan is the opposite. He gave his kid to them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
You know, it's
and
interesting.
I was waiting for some parents in the back. I was like, but I let him take my kid, because remember Morgan said that. He said, well, I wasn't just snatching them. I would just tell them how good it is in Padre, and if they were having hard times feeding their child, I knew a place that the kid can get, you know, food and shelter and blah blah blah, and that people were handing over the kids. So I want to see some of those parents. I want to see how they handle things with this.
Yeah. So it's tricky. I can't really see it. It's mostly, you know, a part of it is because of the season. It hasn't really made me think of what a ideal finale would be. So I can't, you know, it's hard for me to predict what or try to think of what would be a good finale when the show isn't really heading towards anything that seems like would be that satisfactory. But we'll see. I could be proven wrong.
There we go. Rich, what about you? What would make you happy?
What would make me happy would be this show coming to an end.
Oh,
I have not seen, you know, obviously we could be optimistic that it's going to all stick to the landing, but because of the way it started, I don't really have a lot of confidence that it is going to stick to the landing. There are so many questions about other characters that we don't know what happened to them in this span of time. And of course, they are going to drag to answer those questions because we're on episode 3. We still haven't seen Strand and a few of the other characters. So obviously, this is a 12-episode season. I kind of feel like you need to be moving with a little bit of a much quicker pace to give us some answers. Mm-hmm. But we did get the Padre answer in this episode, so let's see what happens. But I don't have any faith it's going to actually be a good ending, though, because of how it started. You know, usually when something starts bad, it's hard to redeem the show. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, that was the one thing I was thinking about. I was like, well, this is a big reveal, the whole Padre, and you're doing this on episode 3. So I would have thought that this would at least have been episode 6 to do that dun dun dun, because even the way it ended, it was like, well, we've been training to fight. This is it. And then I could see them saying, all right, tune back in like a few months and we'll get second part and you'll see the big fight. But no, they did this in episode 3. So that's why it tells me that there is more than what we're seeing is going to take place. Definitely more. But I think, just like we saw with Walking Dead proper, with the Commonwealth, the end goal is going to be turning that island, Padre, into what everyone thought it was, a safe haven. You know, at the beginning of the episode, Dad talked about it's an island, we're protected, trading. This is why we get off. Well, this is it. Morgan goes, whatever happens, but then it's back to this is it. So people come to Padre? Yes, come to Padre. Safe haven. We're in an island. We're going to put fences so that way the walkers just don't walk up on the beach. And we're going to have everything great. We're going to open trade with the communities and stuff, and life will be peachy. And I think that's it. This is a fight for the island. And that was one of the things that even on Talking Dead, when Talking Dead used to talk about Walking Dead and with fear, it's like what would be the safest place to start a community, right? From people say, oh, a hill. Well, was that where you could always see who's coming up and walkers fall down and they can't balance, blah blah blah. But then this was one of them, an island. You know, not just a small remote island, but something that's really distant from land that you have to take a boat to get to. And the way we see it from when they show the view, it's not that far from land. But the way Daniel described it, we searched for 7 years and we couldn't find it.
They searched for 7 years, couldn't find it, but somehow June was found by that one dude, and somehow she was found by the group, right? Like
Oh yeah. Well, that was the other funny part when they did you where is he? Oh, he's dead. Oh, what? Where? He was just looking for his kid. Oh, his kid's dead too. He's like, yeah, she did it. What? I mean, yeah, but you made me do it. It was comical. That whole thing was very comical. But
Daniel should have taught these people not to be like, hey, you know, we're looking for your kids, but if they turn out dead, you know, just don't kill yourself and help us out. There might be some of the other kids alive.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll have to see. But there you go, people. That was for episode 3, Odessa, last season for Fear the Walking Dead. Hopefully things get a little better and we get some more engaging storylines or expanding on the storyline, because we already know the overarching storyline, which isn't great, but there's got to be more to it. They pulled back the curtain right here in episode 3, so there's got to be some more surprises. Something has to happen. I'm also curious to see if any of these cast members will get other roles in some of the other spinoffs. You know, we have 3 spinoffs coming. We got Dead City next. We have Norman Reedus, Walking Dead, and then of course the Rick and Michonne, which is very early in production. So that's the last. And I'm interested to see how any of these cast members from either Walking Dead proper or from Fear, if they link up in some way. And I can see that happening, because every time they say that it would never happen, it happens. People may not remember this, but when Fear the Walking Dead first was introduced and Gimple was asked about, are we going to see any crossover? He says no, because it's on the other part of the United States. This is a different story we're going with. They're dealing with different issues. They're handling other things. Remember, Nick had a drug problem, and there was other things that were different that we didn't see, which is great. But season or 2 after that, throw that out the window. Next, you know, we got Morgan and Dwight, you know, making the trek.
We'll get Terry Crews. You know,
yeah, there you go. See, that's what I'm saying. What if we see some of that? What if we see some of the people from Tales of the Walking Dead, if they pop up? I don't know. We'll see, people. But thanks again for tuning in over on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Of course, you can find more content over at thecoalitionwithak.com, and with reviews and interviews and all that other good jazz. So thanks again for your support, everybody. And we will be back next week for episode 4. All right, people. Have a good week. Peace.
Peace.